When it comes to medical device and software, there are different types of classification. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello, I'm Christian Kestner and you are watching a video that is part of my course on software for medical devices and IEC 62304. If you would like to register for it, follow the link in the video description and it will take you to the Medical Device HQ website. If you haven't subscribed yet, click that red button and don't forget to switch on the notifications. Now, let's get started. In this video, I will show you what different types of classification you should apply to your medical device and software. And there are quite a few different types of classifications. Let me present the four competitors: medical device classification, software safety classification, documentation level, and software as a medical device categorization, also known as SAM categorization. But to be fair, they are not competing, they serve different purposes. Let's start with the medical device classification. Most countries have a regulatory requirement based on the risk of the device. The higher the risk of the product, the more and tougher requirements you will find on both your development process as well as the product approval process. Here you can see the major classes of medical devices in the EU. There are some more subclasses, but these are the major ones. The classes range from relatively harmless products in Class 1 to more risky products in Class 3. For low-risk devices, you might be allowed to launch a product without much interaction with authorities or a notified body. While for devices with a higher classification, the expectations are higher and you need to engage with a notified body. The expectations on evidence are also higher and can, for example, result in requirements for large clinical studies to prove that the medical device fulfills its purpose and is safe. For a long time, many medical device software products were classified as low-risk Class 1 devices in the EU, but the arrival of the FDR in Europe was a game changer. This happened through the introduction of Classification Rule 11. With strict implementation Rule 11, most medical device software products will become at least Class 2A. There is a guidance document that assists you in dealing with Rule 11, but getting the classification right can still be challenging. So far, I've mostly been speaking about the EU market. What about the US then? Are the classes the same? The principles are the same, but not identical. For the US market, there are Class 1, 2 and 3 medical devices, so that's quite similar, but there are no 2A or 2B, only Class 2. The EU and the US are also similar in the way that the higher the risk with the product is, the higher the classification will be. And with high classification, there will be more requirements on a product and the approval process. So in simplified words, same, but different. If we look at regions outside of EU and US, you will find that medical device classifications are different, but the underlying principles are the same. The higher the risk, the higher the expectations are on you. Just a heads up, medical devices may be in different classes depending on which market you are considering. So to avoid surprises, it is good practice to check the device classification for every market you're planning to launch in. Next up is software safety classification. The purpose of the software safety classification is to determine the rigor of the requirements in the IEC 62304 standard. The standard is intended to be applicable worldwide and is not linked to any medical device classification. And when it comes to numbering, the software safety classification uses letters. Class A is considered a low-risk classification and Class C is a high-risk classification. Software safety classification is based on a potential injury a software failure can cause. I will show you how to establish a software safety classification in a separate video, but for now, I will simplify it a bit and say that software safety classification is driven by the severity of the harm that the software failure can cause. This means that generally speaking, there is a correlation between medical device classification and software safety classification. But in theory, you could have a medical device in a low class with a high software safety classification. And likewise, you can have a high risk Class 3 medical device with the lowest software safety classification, if the software is harmless. But in practice, this is nearly impossible for software-only products. Still, it could be possible for embedded software if it's not providing any medical purpose. For example, some fancy lighting effect to make the product more attractive to customers. But in that case, do you really need to complicate your Class 3 product with a piece of software that is not adding anything to your intended purpose? Regardless of any potential correlation between medical device classification and software safety classification, you as a manufacturer will have to classify your medical device according to both. This applies to all your medical devices containing software, including software as a medical device, also referred to as SAMD. And if one software classification isn't enough, there is also something called documentation level. This term comes from the US and the FDA, and as in the case of software safety classification, it is based on how harmful your software can be. But the software safety classification and the documentation level address this matter from different directions. Software safety classification determines the process rigor you must apply for software development, while documentation level is about documentation expected in a pre-market submission. The higher the risk, the longer the list of expected documents will be. But if you think about it, the more process rigor you apply, the more documentation you likely generate. So if I simplify it, the perspectives are different, but the result is more or less the same. Unlike software safety classification, the documentation level consists of two categories, basic or enhanced. Even though software safety classification and documentation level serve different purposes, they are related to each other. It's not a perfect match, so please don't take this for granted for all products. When establishing the documentation level for an FDA submission, it can be convenient to review similar products in the FDA clearance database. If you're lucky, you will find a product that is close enough. However, the FDA introduced the term documentation level in June 2023, so it's likely that you're bumping into the legacy term level of concern when searching in the database. As a guiding principle, I suggest the following translation between the two terms, but please review the latest FDA guidance to ensure you get the documentation level right for your specific product. Lastly, it is not enough with two alternatives for software classification, there is one more. The third classification term used in the software domain is called SAMD categorization, and SAMD stands for Software as a Medical Device. SAMD categorization is an invention by the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, IMDRF, and applies to stand-alone software products. The idea behind SAMD categorization is slightly different compared to documentation level or software safety classification. In simplified words, we can say that documentation level and software safety classification are based on the severity of harm. SAMD categorization uses a two-dimensional approach and takes significance and situations into account in the classification assessment. The intended use of the information provided by the SAMD has different significance depending on what the information will be used for. For example, the significance is higher if it's used to treat a patient compared to if it's used to inform clinical management. And again, I allow myself to simplify a bit and say that significance is similar to severity of harm. On the other axis, you will find healthcare situation or condition. Here the idea is that the criticality of a healthcare situation shall be considered in the risk categorization. For example, if a software is used in an intensive care unit to calculate medication, the situation is most likely different if you have a situation where a patient is dying and the right dose is needed within seconds compared to adjusting doses on a daily basis. The SAMD categorization uses Roman numerals just like the EU device classification. It is almost like someone intentionally is trying to get us confused. Unfortunately, the SAMD categorization has been disconnected from both standards and established regulations, but is now slowly getting more and more traction. Earlier in this video, I told you about a guidance document on the MDR Rule 11. This is one example where SAMD categorization has become useful. The table I just presented is used in a guidance document and looks like this. Here you see a comparison between medical device classification and risk categorization from the SAMD guidance. It is worth mentioning that Class 1 medical devices do not even qualify to be in the table. This again emphasizes that almost any medical device software according to the EU MDR is likely to become at least Class 2A. Maybe you ask yourself, why on earth should you walk the extra mile to first establish a SAM categorization and then the medical device classification? Well, there are no formal requirements to establish a SAM categorization. It is a matter of personal preferences, but I find the SAM guidance helpful, for example, to understand the importance of criticality. If a software is used to diagnose someone in a critical condition, like an intensive care unit, then the software belongs to category 4. But if the very same software is used only in non-serious situation, it could belong to category 2. In the EU MDR classification term, this means a class 3 medical device and a class 2A medical device, which is a big difference. A last comment about sound risk categorization. The categorization is also used in guidance documents related to clinical evaluation. These guidance documents are becoming state-of-the-art when working with medical device software. They are even recognized by the FDA. So yes, I think it adds value to establish a SAM categorization for software as a medical device. You've now learned about 4 different classification concepts related to medical device software. If you are a software engineer, especially in a large company, you will probably have people helping you out with these things. Still, if you are in a small company, you can most certainly get involved in software safety classification or have to actually do it yourself. In case you get involved in classification work, here is the summary of the classification we just gone through. You will also find this table in the text below. And that's all in this video about classification. So, did you learn something new and interesting? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to connect with us, we are on LinkedIn too. Just find us at Medical Device HQ. That's all for now. Make sure you come back. Thanks for watching. Happy classification.